For a variety of reasons, the Water Resources Outlook has not been released for a while. Fortunately, there has not been any widespread drought in the area to address. Dates for issuance are on the calendar, and you should see it regularly going forward. With that, let's hear from Jeff about our climatology for August 2023 edition of the Water Resources Outlook.
Okay, thanks, Todd, and glad to be back providing these water resource outlooks to the people in the Southeast. So let's take a look at the rainfall situation, and we see the last 30 days has been pretty typical of summertime rainfall, a highly variable pattern with lots of red colors, meaning 5 or more inches. But we can also see some areas that have seen the rain here in midsummer across parts of eastern North Carolina as well as southwestern Alabama, where those green colors show areas that have received less than 2 inches of rainfall. And we see that in the departures from normal, where the reds and oranges are showing where we've had some decent deficits in rainfall for the past month. Just recently, we've had this hot and dry spell, which is not out of the ordinary for mid-August across the region. But yes, we do have some rainfall deficits across a good portion of the Southeast, looking back over the last 30 days. But thankfully, when we look at since the beginning of the year, we saw the rain this spring and early summer, near normal in most locations, but some areas in the blue and especially purple colors there, highlighting areas that are running several inches above normal. And this has helped keep our stream flows resilient, even with the recent dry weather. We see here the 28-day average stream flows and lots of green dots on the map, indicating near normal conditions. Again, a few pockets of below normal stream flow in those areas where recent dryness has really had an effect, like there in eastern North Carolina, the Gulf Coast, and western portions of the Florida Peninsula. But this is the dry time of year for the region. In fact, August through October is the period when we see stream flows typically at their lowest, keeping flood potential at bay. It is also a time when drought can creep into the region, but so far it's been limited across the Southeast. Just those same 3 areas there, eastern Carolinas, parts of the Gulf Coast, and western areas of the Florida Peninsula, especially near the Tampa area and south. Again, dry weather and low stream flows are pretty typical this time of year, and thus it is usually a quiet time for river flooding, as we see here in our river flood climatology built off past data. And we're in week 34, and this is usually a downtime for river flooding. We do have a secondary, elevated time period there between week 36 and 41, and this ties mostly into the convective wet season for Florida, as well as the typical increase in tropical activity we see here. This is the river flood climatology for Central and South Florida, and you see the number of river floods typically ramps up in mid to late summer, peaking in late summer to early autumn. And then dramatically dropping off by week 40 and 41, which is like mid-autumn, or actually more like October. Again, much of this is tied to the tropical season activity and heavy rainfall that is associated with tropical storms. When we look at the number of tropical storms that affected the Southeast, shown here, broken down by parts of the region, we see we're in week 34 right now. And week 35 through 40 historically has had the most storms and indicate the most active time period, especially for the interior Southeast. They're shown in the green and blue bars. So over the next several weeks, as we always say, our water resources and flood potential often hinges on the tropical activity this time of year. And so we're entering that most active period, and we'll be watching that closely and following and working with the National Hurricane Center. And Todd will talk more on this and how it fits into our future forecast.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Looking first to the next few days, it will be pretty quiet for most of the Southeast as high pressure settles in over the region. There is a potential for scattered thunderstorms this evening, but as the high sets up Friday and into Saturday, the weather will remain quiet. Saturday, we expect a cold front to start pushing into the Carolinas and stall for a few days. By Sunday morning, we will start to see increased rain chances along this stalled front, stretching through the Carolinas and across northern Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. These rain chances will continue into Monday and Tuesday as the front moves very little. Until Wednesday, as a low lifts through the northeast and high pressure moving through the Midwest combine to push another cold front down through the Tennessee Valley. Looking at the 7-day forecasted rainfall totals from WPC, you can see the elevated amounts in the Carolinas from that stalled front. Also notice some enhancement extending from the Big Bend area in Florida. There is a potential for a tropical system in that area around the 30th. There is still uncertainty with the development in motion, but we are watching this area. Getting out to the longer term, days 8 through 14, the Climate Prediction Center has most of the southeast at near or below normal precipitation amounts, with the Gulf Coast and Florida leaning above normal with some tropical activity possible, as mentioned before. And now I'll pass it along to Todd for the extended outlook.
So let's take a peek a little further out, and the first thing we will address is the hurricane season. The National Hurricane Center has issued their updated hurricane season forecast and are now calling for an above normal hurricane season. An average Atlantic hurricane season has 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. And since we have already had 8 named storms this year and we are approaching the heart of the hurricane season, that forecast does not seem all that unreasonable. The climatological peak of the hurricane season is September 10th. While the first 2 months of the hurricane season had produced 5 named storms, there had been no impacts in the southeast U.S. Arlene threatened, but never made landfall. It did bring some rains to the Florida peninsula, but no river flooding. Last weekend, it seems as though the hurricane season started in earnest, with many storms in the Atlantic. Today, there is some potential for development in the Atlantic, Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico. While we don't always look at our temperatures forecast, most of the southeast has been very warm, and that trend may continue into September. While we have avoided drought, warmer temperatures could push us in that direction. However, our September rainfall forecast looks above normal for all of the southeast. As Jeff mentioned previously, it often is the result of tropical weather, and with the potentially active hurricane season coming up, heavy rain and flooding is possible. Our ENSO forecast, which indicates a moderate to strong El Nino from now through much of the winter, may play a large role in our weather. A strong El Nino tends to inhibit storm development in the Atlantic. That had been true through much of the summer. We will see how much that impacts the peak of the hurricane season. The current seasonal forecast from September through November indicates above normal rainfall throughout the southeast. Models are leaning in that direction. So while I hinted at potential drought conditions spreading, all things point to not getting into drought and a greater potential for some flooding during this time. So really, while there is more typically our dry time of year for the bulk of the southeast and our wet time of the year in Florida, we believe we have a normal risk for flooding for the late summer and into fall. And now we will look a little further ahead and at our winter forecast. The forecast from the Climate Prediction Center indicates a classic El Nino pattern with above normal chances running through much of the southern tier of the country, but especially in the southeast U.S. While it is not a guarantee, we do have concerns for heavy rain as we approach the winter. Jeff has looked at some of the climatology for El Nino years, and here's the October summary of some of those years. Many of them have shown above normal precipitation. That trend continues as we get into November, where much of the southeast shows above normal precipitation, and December shows the same thing in the southeast. Bottom line, in the short term, the hurricane season has become more active, and while the temperatures may end up being above normal, the rain looks like it will offset that to keep us near normal and have the potential for flooding during that time. The long term looks like rain and the potential for flooding as we approach the winter. We can probably address it more specifically as we get closer to that time. Until then, it looks like an active last 4 months of this year and into early next year. We hope this water resource outlook has been helpful for you. Please let us know if you have any questions or concerns going forward. We expect to record our next water resources outlook on September 21st. Thanks for listening.